On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Jonathan Jaffe. He is the CISO at Lemonade. And we're going to be talking about how an organization can work around their first security hire. And this doesn't mean you have to be a startup. You could be at a little bit bigger company that's, adjusting their security parameters, focusing on growing in terms of maturity. We're going to be talking about how dealing with the relationship to other teams, how to tackle lack of staff, when to potentially spend and when to partner with other entities, security startups to kind of leverage IP that you might not have. I'm excited to have Jonathan on. So thank you for doing this. Appreciate you being on.
Oh, thank you for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. So I know I mentioned you're the CISO at Lemonade, and just for context, maybe if we could just understand your responsibility there and what Lemonade does, and we'll just jump right in.
Sure. So for Lemonade, I manage all of security. That covers everything from actual technical security to physical security of the buildings. It also covers things like governance and compliance as it relates to security and data privacy. Lemonade is an insurance company, but it's a very new insurance company. And it's one that, we're using a buzzword, really is disrupting the market. And I don't often use those phrases, but it's very, very different. It's a company that actually cares a lot about its customers and finds ways to benefit customers by employing technology to reduce fraud, and also using a give back feature where we take claims that weren't used and we allow customers to choose the social good causes, nonprofits to donate that money to. We're very much a high-tech company based in the cloud, started in the cloud, really with no on-premises technology to speak of. And that's who we are. We've grown in 4.25 years to 1 million customers, more or less. And that's pretty fast in insurance.
It's a pretty cool company. I think we could probably do a whole episode on the impact it's probably making in the industry. I mean, insurance is sometimes a laggard in terms of novel ideas, but you guys are definitely doing something awesome. And I guess as the CISO, everything's in the cloud. A lot of different challenges in terms of making sure you guys are secure and compliant. Maybe talk to us about where you guys are at in terms of security, like just size of team, how big the security team is, and maybe we'll just kind of backtrack into the topic from there.
Well, we're just building out our security team. So we currently have one full-time security person in addition to myself. We're hiring for a number of positions, but we've just started building the team out.
Awesome. So I know obviously everyone, is at different, maturity levels in security, but yet it's one of the most important components of any organization. I guess when you're looking at, your first hire, trying to build out that security team, what typically, from your standpoint, is the priority? Like, how do you go by prioritizing that first security hire for a team?
For security hire, well, I guess you first prioritize the most likely risk and harm that you're going to suffer, and then you try and get the people that are going to serve that. For us, we already actually did a really good job of securing our IT environment, which is the biggest risk. You're phishing, for example, and people being essentially their accounts being taken over is probably your biggest risk. We already had that really well secured. So our first hire is actually focused on cloud security, and that involves securing our cloud environment where we build and host our application that serves our customers in the back end.
Absolutely. When you're maybe looking back through your career, and I know you guys are all completely in the cloud, you mentioned cloud security is your first step, obviously. When you're thinking back on, on-premise solutions versus the cloud, what would, I guess, if you were looking just back in the past, like when you're looking at that, what would have been the first hire 10, 15 years ago?
10, 15 years ago, probably would be a IT security person, somebody to secure your corporate network, without a doubt. So that would be 10 or 15 years ago. It would probably be securing the corporate network, and that would be a network engineer, most likely. That assumes that you have IT that's handling just basic desktop security.
Sure. And then now your focus, obviously, you guys have nothing on premise. So the number one focus is cloud security. And because obviously the cloud is the network and shifted it to the cloud, but still priority one is to make sure no one gets in.
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
And I guess when you're looking at the way you guys are set up, and obviously you're securing the cloud, you guys are cloud first, and you're obviously growing out the team. How did you go about, like, just in terms of prioritizing initiatives and trying to balance resources within the context of that initial, focus of, hey, cloud security is number one initiative. You obviously are, growing startup. How'd you balance, like, making sure you had the right staff, balancing the prioritization of doing what you have to do?
There are two competing areas that both need heavy security focus: cloud and the application. There are other areas, but those are really, they're my priorities after your IT security is well established. Cloud security, you can control as a security department, you can control more of it more quickly and need fewer resources to establish security in the cloud, meaning your configuration of your environment, whatever the cloud environment is solid. You've got your perimeter security up. You have things like web application firewalls, kind of the more traditional or analogous traditional services. The other area is application security, but applications, because they're written by very large teams of developers, and modern applications are written essentially as microservices. You've got many, many groups of developers. It's a much bigger beast to tackle, and you need more resources. You also need more buy-in from other people over whom you don't have control, primarily the development teams. So our strategy has been, let's first focus on making sure our cloud environment is as solid as possible, because that is generally going to be the second attack vector, the first being IT security and account takeovers of your employees. And once you have that, which is more manageable, then you can focus on the more complex security challenge, which is securing the application itself. And when I say securing the application, it doesn't mean your application isn't secured when you secure your cloud environment. It means that you're not yet getting into all the details of securing code or making sure that microservice A, when it talks to microservice B, is using the proper authentication scheme or the proper roles. Because those are there's so much more involved and so much more complicated, and other teams control those areas. It just is much more efficient to focus first on having a solid cloud foundation before you tackle the application, the more complex application, how it sits on top of that foundation.
So obviously you mentioned application security, obviously that lots of this is written in microservices, you're partnering with other teams. How has that relationship come about? Like, as the CISO, how do you kind of set out making sure that you have the right relationship with those other teams?
It can be difficult because there's so many teams, at least a company our size, there's so many discrete teams that develop parts of the product, and they're all so busy doing what they do. You can't meet all of them all the time at the same time with the same intensity. So my approach is first to develop a good working relationship with the directors of those different teams, because obviously those directors have leverage over the people who work for them. But at the same time, you'll find what naturally happens is some people bubble up either with an interest in security or just an interest in making sure the application itself is secure. And those people as developers will gravitate towards you when issues come up, and you'll find they'll become champions. And so in parallel with working with directors and then say team leads below them, you'll find you also have some of the developers who themselves want to champion security. And so making those relationships as basic as just hanging out with them, eating lunch with them, becoming friends with those people can't be the value that can't be overstated in terms of getting some of your agenda taken up by the developers.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I was just listening to your response, and I've had a number of people in the security space on, and a lot of times we're talking about finding a security champion. And I was just thinking, like, how long is security going to have to find that champion? Because it sounds like to find the champion means like there's not enough awareness. You need people to be supportive of it versus we know how imperative it is to have security. I mean, Lemonade would stop functioning without the right level of security. So it's just interesting to me that what I'm consistently hearing is looking for that security champion, and then obviously when you see any CTO or CIO type initiative, security is at the number one spot. There's definitely a little bit of maybe a bit of a gap there. I mean, any thoughts?
Fortunately, Lemonade already has some pretty solid security just because of the architects who developed the application, had already thought about it. But there's an inherent tension between security and product. And this isn't any brilliance on my part. You've heard this, I'm sure, from many people. Product has to make the company money. And so features that the product group is developing always take priority. Even if you have developers who are focused on security, ultimately they have to release new features. And of course, the way applications are developed now, that could be on a daily basis, if not even more frequently sometimes. That often pushes security aside in one form or another. So I think that tension is always going to be there, which is why moving towards some degree of automated security is probably a better bet than the mantra of, left to developers and expect that developers are also going to be security experts. They're not. Their product, their directive is to make a microservice that takes two numbers, divides them by input from another microservice, and spits out a result, and to do that really well. They can't also be experts in security in the same way that they can't be experts in AI. You have specialists for that. So I don't think you're ever going to get past that competition of resources between product and security. I don't think that's ever going to merge. But what you can do is you can look for tools that take on a lot of that burden from the developer, which he or she isn't really going to be incentivized, prioritized over product anyway. And you can allow tools to help them, the developers, meet their security requirements.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, you constantly hear the shift left and I guess automating security is a better potential path when you're potentially looking, down the horizon in terms of, some of that, automation of security. Is it going to be more internal creation in that type of product, or do you think it's more, vendor driven and bringing in outside products to maybe accomplish something like that?
It depends on the size of the organization and the maturity. I know some of my peers at some other really great high-tech companies that are larger and also deal with, for example, corporate customers. They have fairly large app security departments, app security developer departments. So they write a lot of their own tools, and therefore they wouldn't go out and buy tools as frequently as other companies that are focused on delivering, business to consumer products that might be smaller and just don't have the budget yet. Those people. I think it depends on sophistication as well as company size.
Absolutely. And when you mention, obviously, budget's always a thing, no matter what size the organization.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, can't get around that one. But when you're looking at potential spend, right, opportunities to maybe do more with less, I think you mentioned, in our pre-call conversation, building the right relationships with potential up and coming security startups. Maybe talk to us a little bit about, what you've seen in terms of your experience and kind of what you meant in terms of partnering with security startups.
Yeah. In full disclosure, I probably partner with security startups mainly because I just love new technology and I love seeing what really smart people are doing. And it's kind of cool to have that shiny new object. But there's definitely a mutual benefit. So what I do and what a number of my peers do at other companies is they look at these small security startups. And of course, they're blossoming where I'm at, which is in Tel Aviv. And they agree, I agree, to bring them on as a design partner where I can test out their product and give them feedback, which clearly benefits them. But I may also end up getting the benefit of having one of my security needs met, at least for a short while, at essentially no cost. There's always a time cost, but no licensing cost. And then I get to test drive that product for a while until the product is ready to be sold. And at that point, I can make a choice to sell it. But the secondary benefit of that is you end up meeting some really sharp people who invariably teach you and others in your organization, like developers, something new about security, but also about what you're doing and what can be done better. I'm kind of addicted to this. I have, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 of these products going at any time. And some of them last for a number of months before they get fully launched. And there's not been a single one that hasn't provided some benefit to me. And I'd like to think that the companies have found it beneficial to try the product out on real world customers.
That's interesting. So I guess, partnering with the startups gives you insight in terms of what's emerging, where the technology is headed. In general sense of, just keeping yourself abreast of, new developments in other security areas, or just, being aware of what's coming down in security to kind of expand your own knowledge base. Are there any areas that you kind of look at to, blogs or podcasts or, conferences to kind of expand your own knowledge base?
Yeah, definitely. So outside of meeting startups who often expose me to areas I hadn't thought about, and I've really enjoyed that. My next best resource, and sometimes better than even startups, is just being in a Slack community with peer CISOs. There's nothing as good as just asking the question, hey, how are you guys dealing with this problem? Or just reading people's posts where they have tried out a new product, or they just suffer from a certain type of attack and they share that. The information sharing is invaluable. Hands down, that's the best resources. Get involved with a community of similarly interested people and just share information. Don't withhold information, because it's to everybody's benefit.
Absolutely. Do you feel like security? I mean, the community is definitely, from what I've heard, I'm not a security practitioner, but I'm going to ask you. But do you feel it's more of an us versus them compared to other industries? Like, let's say if you're a software engineer, obviously, you can't share all the potential stuff you might be working on, depending on what you're working on in a product. But with security, everyone's trying to infiltrate, and there isn't really a benefit to keeping, trade secrets, because obviously you're trying to benefit the community and being more secure.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, it is very much us, as in everybody who's got a legitimate business interest or a personal interest against people who are trying to cause harm to those people. So it's really everybody in business together to make sure that bad actors are not harming anybody. I think most people that I know in the security community very much feel like sharing information is to everybody's benefit, which ultimately is to that person's benefit over time.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you a final question, because just this notion of community, it's a, constant battle trying to keep the bad guys out, however way you want to qualify who the bad guy is here. But how do you kind of personally, kind of decompress and, kind of allow yourself to have that, mental health aspect of, realizing that while it feels like it might be a sprint on a daily basis, it's really a marathon in terms of the security space?
I mean, for me, this is very personal. I think just having perspective. I think being at maybe my age and the state of my career, realizing that bad things will happen, and your business will suffer. How much it suffers depends upon how prepared you are or how extreme that bad thing is. But you'll recover. It sounds trite, but the next day will come again. Your family will still be there. You'll still have a job. Maybe you don't if it's really bad, but it really does put things into perspective. Honestly, that's how I kind of get past the busyness of the day, where I think, oh, this was a bad day. We saw something we didn't want to see, but I realized, oh, it's just like life. You just will have tough periods in security, and you have periods where you've done a really good job and you'll be appreciated for it. So that's how I deal with it.
Awesome. I like the perspective. If somebody wants to reach out and kind of touch on something that you've covered on the podcast, is LinkedIn an ideal place to reach out to you, or Twitter, or what's your preferred medium?
Yeah, I'm also a privacy attorney, so I've never been a big fan of social media.
Okay.
I guess more recently, I have looked at LinkedIn a little bit more because I'm more involved with the security community, and a lot of people communicate there. LinkedIn is great. Email directly to me at Lemonade is great.
Okay.
Especially if somebody is either just looking for some direction or has an idea, wants to share or have stuff shared with him or her. I love working with people, especially people who are just bouncing ideas around, especially around technology. So yeah, email is great.
Awesome. We'll include that in the show notes. And obviously, if you heard something that Jonathan's mentioned on the podcast, you want to follow up, reach out to him. Sounds like he's really passionate about the community as well. And that's it for this episode. Thank you for being on, Jonathan. I really do appreciate it.
Amir, thank you very much. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Absolutely. And we'll be back again with another guest on this set of topics. And until then, I always ask for two things. One, please keep subscribing to the podcast. It's been growing and it's exciting. And secondly, topics. If you want to, send me a LinkedIn message and, share a topic that you want me to cover, I'm happy to do that. I've been getting topics I'm trying to align with the right guests, and it really helps the community. But until next time, thanks.